Hello and welcome to the Indian Classical Guitar Academy. I'd like to address a particular thing that crops up in my mind occasionally, particularly in response to a lot of the time when you look on YouTube and you see maybe videos about blues or about developing blues playing. It might be a title like 10 levels of 12-bar blues, or how to improve your blues playing, how to break out of the pentatonic. A lot of people hear about that, how to break out of the pentatonic and sort of like break free of those blues licks. And there's a kind of consensus that you've been playing blues and you're tired of what you're doing and you don't think that you're that good and you need to get better, and what am I supposed to do? What's the next step? And then a lot of the time the way that people address this is like, well, you need to sort of like jazz it up, or you need to learn to put some 2-5-1s in there, or you need to play more chromatically, or you need to like superimpose different chord tones or arpeggios. And that's kind of more like, well, that would be a good answer if it was like, how can I turn my blues into a blues jazz piece? That would be great for that. But if we look at the greatest blues guitar players that everyone loves so much. I mean, I talked about a few of them, in my opinion, on the previous video about my 10 favorite guitar solos. If you look at Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, people love David Gilmour, Eric Clapton, or I think Jimmy Page in his heyday, incredible blues guitar player. And then you've got the people like B.B. King, and even I would say people like Frank Zappa. I mean, it's more quirky, but he's definitely someone who's developed through blues into other directions, right? So if you take all of these people and you say, right, well, what are they doing? And they're not doing the stuff that a lot of these YouTube videos would tell you to do. They're not basically just stepping closer and closer towards jazz and becoming more and more kind of jazz-like in their harmonic, and melodic method. It's not really to do with that, actually. And I think that the top blues people that we love so much, they have figured out their own way, because it's very much about individual expression, but they've figured out their own way to pack an enormous amount of expression and nuances into their playing. And when you look at the different lines that they play, it's like, for example, if you look at tab for a blues guitar, you look at a Jimi Hendrix tab book, it's usually quite a useless endeavor, because every little note has got like a pick scrape or a rake or a little bend or a tiny pull off and a slide, and it's like every tiny little bit of the phrase has got so many little micro sort of expressions and all these tiny little techniques that are built into it. And jazz guitar players, they don't do that. They're not sliding and bending and hammering on and raking and doing microtonal bends in every tiny, like in every tiny little nuance of a phrase. They're more concerned with navigating through changes. And I mean, jazz guitar players are some of the most incredible, insane musicians in the world. Jazz guitar players are amazing, okay? So don't get me wrong, but blues guitar players are amazing in a different way. There's something different, and it's not like the blues guys need to kind of up their game and catch up with the jazz guys in order to be better at blues. Like, that's not how it's going. Jimi Hendrix doesn't need to learn how to play like Wes Montgomery to be better at playing blues. Like, Jimi Hendrix is the best at playing blues. That's just it. I mean, if you listen to Red House, you listen to like the little nuances of his solos, it's an incredibly complicated, sophisticated language, but it's gone into like the microcosm of the phrasing, the attack of the notes, the little, like the timing, the way it kind of floats over the beat and then lands in the right place, even though it felt like it was like drifting away, and then it comes back, and a lot of rhythmic displacement and triplet feel. All of these things are incredibly kind of virtuoso in the blues realm. But they're much more based on like the movements of the hand. It's like, you can't really tab this stuff, you can't really teach this stuff, you can't write it down. It's all about the nuances of like how that hand is moving on the guitar. So it has to be fully embodied. It's not really cerebral. It's happening much more at the deep level of physicality, and it's learned by listening and feeling and creating like a feedback loop where you're hearing and you're sensing and you're judging and you're reacting to what you're playing, and you're learning to like weave in all of these tiny little details into your playing. So that's what I think when you get the best blues players. I mean, think of someone like Derek Trucks, you know, as a slide player, or Jeff Beck, right? And he's doing all these tiny little nuances that no one else has done, but he's a blues player. I mean, he's done jazz fusion, but he never really played like a jazz guitar player. You know, he's much more blues in his kind of aesthetic and his like root sense. So that's really something that I would draw people's attention to. But that area of learning of how you get good at that is a very mysterious process, and it happens really through a very deep immersion and a very you have to kind of really identify with the sound and the process and your expression of playing. It's like you really need to like believe in yourself and connect to your instrument in a very visceral, honest way, and you need to do that for hours and hours and hours and hours. Because when I was learning to play, I would just solo and solo and solo and solo and just play and improvise and then try playing along to different records, and I wasn't doing exercises, I wasn't practicing scales, I wasn't looking at, for the first several years of playing, I wasn't looking at theory. I was just immersing myself in like watching Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock and then picking up the guitar and then trying to play like that and trying to get those sounds. So that's the process, I think. It's a much more mysterious process. And of course, you can level up your technique by practicing all different ways of moving around the pentatonic boxes and then adding in all the different notes. And I mean, all the more theoretical things, they all play a role, because of course your blues playing can become really improved by learning to target different notes on the chord changes, or learning, like with the hybrid blues scale, how to add every different note of the chromatic scale, how to add that into your pentatonic sort of framework. All of that is very, very valuable and really expands the musicality of your playing in a way which is more, takes a lot of, you can take a lot of inspiration from jazz players when you're doing that. So don't get me wrong, all of the, knowing the theory and then learning modes and, doing like a Dorian or a Mixolydian or doing like major pentatonic as opposed to minor pentatonic blues, all of that stuff is very, very vital. But that isn't the real essence of what makes fantastic blues playing, because it's all about the voice. It's all like imitating the singers. And imagine, like when you listen to Derek Trucks, it's like he sounds like a gospel singer in his voice. It's like you can hear it. It's like he sounds like he's Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey, like going right up there and doing these like crazy, trills and really graceful movements right in the upper register in a way which is just so, like, you can't think about that. You can only play that through that immersion. So it's a very deep process, and that's what I'd like to share, because I think that it's a mysterious kind of way of learning. And I've taught, I've done a lot of blues workshops. For years, I've constructed with a great guitar teacher, a friend of mine. We've constructed blues courses, and they're still online now, actually, of how you can learn to play through the changes and how you can learn to add extra chords into that progression, and how to tackle all the rhythmic stuff and how to navigate all around the fretboard, and then how to look at using different expressive techniques, all of that stuff. So all of that it's really worthwhile. It's all really, you have to learn the proper like music, like the nuts and bolts of it. But what I'm just saying is that there's this extra layer which is not to do with like blues being a stepping stone to jazz, or blues being like somehow what you might play before you learn jazz, as if jazz is like the ultimate destination. That's not the truth, because so many players have gone in a totally different direction from that, and they're the greats that everyone loves today and that have changed music. So yeah, I just thought I'd like to share that with you guys. So thanks very much for watching, and see you on another video soon.